Hey folks, welcome back to Can't Teach Size. Holy smokes, it feels like a while since I've said that, but here we are. My name's Les, I'm one of your regular hosts, and we're back. We have some stuff to talk about. Obviously, we've been on hiatus for a little bit. A lot of you know us from over at Game Over, and you know the circumstances around that and whatnot. So lots of changes going on over here at Can't Teach Size, but nonetheless, we're back because the Jets fans have stuff to talk about today. So we're going to break down the Shawn Monahan trade that's officially been announced today, Montreal and Winnipeg. So who better than your favorite Jets and Habs fans coming here to talk about it? So I'm joined by my regular co-host Brady today. We're going to be back here doing lots of content over the next little bit, and we're joined by a special guest. Who better to kick off the Can't Teach Size reboot than our, I guess, weird to call you former boss, but current friend, Andrew Berkshire. Andrew, how are you doing today?
Good. I mean, it's always good when a former boss is still a friend, right? That's a rare
Yeah,
situation.
100%. Yeah. And you can definitely say the same for a lot of the team over there at Game Over. We're all still super tight, which is great. So that means we got lots of people to pull from when things happen within the Canadian markets, which something clearly happened today. Brady, tell the people why we're here.
Oh boy. I mean, obviously, as the title will list, the Winnipeg Jets have traded for Shawn Monahan from the Montreal Canadiens. Obviously, why Andrew's here. They trade the first round pick for next year's draft, the 2024 draft, as well as a conditional 2027 third round pick. The
Fake
condition
year.
being if the Jets win the cup. I really hope we get to, give that one up. But a very interesting morning here in Jetsland. A very, I don't know. It seems like not everyone is super duper excited on it. I would love to hear what your guys. Obviously, Andrew has the Hab side of things. I'm sure he's pretty happy with the return, but I want to know what you guys think. General thoughts on the trade to start with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the conclusion I've kind of jumped to is that first of all, I don't think anyone necessarily auto wins versus the other team losing. I think both teams have the potential to really benefit from this trade. I think if you want to go clear winner, clear loser, you could probably give the nod to the Montreal Canadiens. But I do think depending on how the next 35 games and then some, hopefully, of Shawn Monahan go, could turn out that the Jets really benefit from this trade as well. I'm gonna throw it to Andrew to really dive into who that player is for those of us Jets fans, especially since he left the Western Conference. I feel like my firsthand sample of Shawn Monahan is probably not at its prime for the time. So Andrew's going to dive into that specifically a little bit later. But before we get into like the specifics of the player and what he's going to do for the team, I'm just curious, and maybe Andrew, I'll throw it to you for this part here. As far as just the paper transaction, the first and the conditional third for the player, for one of the only centers that the Montreal Canadiens have right now, a guy who's on a prove it sort of year. What did you think of this transaction and how it makes sense for both teams?
I mean, it's a huge win for the Montreal Canadiens from multiple avenues, right? They were already paid a first round pick to take Shawn Monahan in a salary dump in the summer of 2022, I think. And he's been a really good player for the Canadiens. Went out for the year with injury last year relatively early on, but was one of their best players before he went down, signed a really nice bargain contract that frankly facilitated the ability to make a trade like this over the summer and has been at worst the Canadians' fourth best forward this season. I think overall, if Kirby Doc was healthy, he'd probably be the fifth best forward, or you could argue maybe Slavkovsky is below Monahan overall, but I think he's starting to edge a little bit higher than Monahan as the time goes on. But this is a player who I think a lot of people are going to be surprised by when you start seeing him up close game to game. I think we're in this time of hockey discourse where I feel like Twitter used to be you would post an article about somebody and then you'd go and there'd be charts in, but there'd be like context and analysis in an article. Now people just throw a chart up there and they're like, see, this guy sucks or like this guy's awesome. And I think whenever you're dealing with players like a Shawn Monahan, who is a depth piece for a contender or an important piece for a bad team, you're going to see holes in their game on the chart and think, well, okay, that's going to be hard to deal with. But at the very least, from the Jets' perspective, they're used to covering for a center who doesn't do much defensively, right? So I feel like he'll fit in pretty well there. And I think he's one of those guys that the numbers defensively don't look good, but if you put it in the context of who he was playing with, they're not as bad as people think. And also, even though his career numbers defensively aren't very good, when you watch him in the game, what you'll continue to notice is that it's not like he's making really bad reads or bad misplays. Defensively, he's not that guy who's costing you on the big plays. He's just not the best defensive player. He has holes in his game for sure. But if you insulate him like the Jets are able to with really good wingers, I don't think he's going to be a defensive liability at all. He's one of those guys that his toolkit is very much about slowing the game down and making good plays. And it's when the game gets too fast for him or he's not able to have someone to give an outlet to, that's when he really gets in trouble. So I think the Jets are honestly a really good fit for Shawn Monahan. And I think both teams are going to end up feeling like winners out of this.
Who was he playing with in Montreal? Just to give a little more context.
So it's been a rotating cast. Outside of Suzuki and Caulfield and Slavkovsky over the last couple of months, there hasn't really been a line that's stuck together for very long. I think his most common line mate this year is still Josh Anderson, might be Yoel Armia. Him and Armia actually played really, really well together over the last couple of months here. I think Monahan has like 20 points in his last 24 games or something like that with Armia and on the power play. Obviously, he won't put up that much power play production in the Jets. He's not going to be in the top spot, but
Well,
very, very smart power play player. Um, he's just when you're playing with Josh Anderson, I think this is the big thing that people need to understand who are down on Monahan defensively. Like, go to natural stat trick and run a simple wowie. And I know wowies aren't like the be all end all of player analysis nowadays. And like they have their own faults too, because you're not accounting for who they're playing with when they're away from said player. But with Monahan or with Josh Anderson, that Shawn Monahan is negative 6.2% expected goals for percentage on the Canadians. And without Josh Anderson, he's plus 2.76%. Like it's this huge swing. Like Monahan without Anderson, in terms of expected goals against, yeah, he's worse than team average. You're giving up an extra like zero point 0.3 goals per 60 minutes. With Anderson, it's over 0.5, and Anderson by himself is like almost an extra one. Like he's
mhm.
just such a black hole defensively that I don't think people realize how much he brings down other centers. And when you don't have Josh Anderson playing with Suzuki and Caulfield, which he did for large stretches last year, and he ends up getting stuck with the other centers who aren't Nick Suzuki, who can't carry the bag, it just is bad. It is really ugly. So I think Monahan's in a really good situation here because you're going to notice the things that he's really good at. And what he's good at, frankly, is just making the game a little bit easier on his wingers. Not through defense necessarily, but through puck control, winning puck battles along the boards. He's not like overly physical, but he's smart physical. Where like
Mhm.
sometimes he just steps in at the right times and wins pucks and extends offensive zone possessions. He's an underrated passer, especially in that bumper spot. Like he is able to just create time where you think he has no time and he holds onto the puck way longer than you think a player ever should. But it usually ends up in a really smart play. Unfortunately, in Montreal, outside of the power play, he's passing to Yoel Armia, who's having a good season for Yoel Armia, but is a maximum like 15 goal per season guy, or Josh Anderson, who was ice cold all year and also like doesn't know how to accept a pass or make a pass. He's just a straight line. If I get a breakaway, I might do something. Otherwise, nothing's gonna ever happen. He had some chemistry with Newhook for a bit, but Newhook's out injured too. Like the
Mhm.
Montreal Canadiens are a wild ride, folks. Like there's really not much there to work with for him. Even I think he worked really well with Brendan Gallagher by the underlying numbers, but Brendan Gallagher has like an 880 PDO this year. It's nuts. He's like,
Unlucky.
yeah, he's wildly unlucky. And like part of it's injury, like his injury history is crazy, but like he can't get the puck to go in for him or his line mates. And every time he's on the ice, he'll do the right thing and just goes right in. It's crazy.
For sure. I know you joked about, oh, he probably won't be helping, the Jets on the, at least on the first power play, but hold your horses. You don't know
Please
that,
do.
because our first power play is dog shit. It is
Really?
bad. It is terrible. Um, and
Eh, eh,
and and we've had Alex Iafallo on it. We've had players there who certainly can be usurped. It depends really on it. Once the Jets are fully healthy, if they do really want to roll, with the ideal top 5 players, which probably doesn't include Monahan and includes Nikolai Ehlers.
Right.
But who knows? They might do the whole split power play thing. But I want to come back to the value on the trade, because we definitely discussed. You gave a bit of a sales pitch to why Jets fans shouldn't be as concerned about this trade. But there definitely has been a lot of discourse regarding on if this was the right move to make. While I will say that a lot of the things that you said definitely give me a little bit more solace, considering, as a team, the Jets have been really good defensively this year. So, I mean, obviously you don't want to take away from your weakness to address, or sorry, you don't want to take away from your strength to address a weakness, but I'm still pretty confident that they'll be good defensively.
oh yeah.
Even with the addition, and at very worst, you always have Connor Hellebuck, the best goalie in the world, behind. So, it is what it is. But I think where the frustration on Jets fans, on this trade from Jets fans comes from, is just the usage of the assets. Because I saw people in the comments under the trade, that when the Jets posted, being like, this is a big price to pay for this player, and people defending it, going, oh well, the Jets never really picked that well, in the back end of the first round, the Jets. Whatever thing. But the issue for me personally is, it's just like, I feel like these assets could have been used better. Like, I feel like there were other options that the Jets could have gone for. If you wanted to get a player, I would say in the same caliber as Shawn Monahan, I think like an Adam Henrique might have been an option, who probably would have been cheaper, I would guess. If you really want to swing for the fences, you could have, tried a little bit more for Elias Lindholm. Claude Giroux is always an option that many Jets fans have brought up. Pavel Buchnevich, the list goes on and on. But now the Jets kind of don't have their first round pick. Of course, they do have a lot of prospects in the cupboard still that they can use as trade assets. And also the cap situation isn't as bleak as it seems. So I was looking at it really quickly just to see kind of where they're at. And if you look at the, just the little summary that Cap Friendly has, it'll say that they have a projected cap space of about 700,000, which is obviously not true. That's not how the cap works. Their deadline cap space is still 3.2, 3.3 potentially million. So they still have options to potentially go out and improve on the defense, maybe add another winger in the top in the top 9 of for the forwards. So that's I just wanted to get that out there, because I feel like that's where the frustration, because I've seen a lot of people frustrated on it, and I think it's important to give kind of the both sides of it, because while we hear a lot of things about how this was a good trade in regards to addressing certain things that the Jets need, because the Jets do improve at the end of the day. That's the biggest thing in my opinion. I look at this as a trade where I'm not excited on the opportunity, or like the roster spot being given to that guy and the assets spent. But at the end of the day, the Jets are a better team, and I think that is what is important to look at with this trade. And they still do have the assets to go ahead and make another deal if you want to look at like a Chris Tanev, which I feel like now that we've gotten a forward, obviously we could still use some improvement on the forward end, but I would look at that guy as a potential improvement on the D as well.
Yeah,
Yeah, it makes
I
sense.
kind of want to push back on you a little bit on, because my thing is like this trade comes into question with the assets and the piece. Like there are the two things to look at. And personally, my question marks are more on the piece than on the assets. These assets are nothing to me, and I genuinely believe it. Like you said, the conditional third is a complete write-off. If the Jets win the Stanley Cup, they could have traded 3 first-round picks, and I don't care, because all I want them to do is win a Stanley Cup. So that one is not even a conversation piece for me. And the thing is, we already have the Montreal second-round pick, which like is
basically a first-round pick.
yeah, and and the Jets' first round pick is likely going to be closer to 30 than it is going to be to middle of the pack and stuff
Mhm.
like that. And I can't be bothered to lose sleep over an asset that is a lottery pick that could possibly help you in 4 years. I am so unworried about 4 years from now. Like I really need this team to do something right now. So the idea of giving up these sorts of assets, like I feel like every time a team makes a trade, you're like, oh, I didn't want to give up that. Oh, I didn't want to give up that. The way trades work is you give up something of value. That's just the only way that they can happen. And I don't value this first round pick almost at all. I keeping it in your pocket to trade for a different piece, that's the conversation I care about.
That's what
But
I'm
as
getting at.
far as like what the value is for, like, because this player I'm not sold on. I need to watch a lot more video over the course of this weekend. I need to listen to more people like Andrew and stuff like that and get a better insight on the player, because that's what I'm not sold on. If the player turns out to be slightly net positive, the first round pick is I don't really care that much. And I think we'll probably move in a little bit to talk about what it does for the Jets and a couple other like adjacent pieces that might improve because of him. We could talk about the face-offs, the line matchups and stuff like that. I'm sure we'll do that to close out the episode. But Andrew, like, what is kind of on your end? Like, we in Winnipeg are a little bit, I don't know, when it comes to our GM, he hasn't made any moves ever that have made me go, I don't like this guy. It's more the lack of moves that have frustrated Jets fans. But in the last little bit, he's done a ton that has been really good. But he's never made a trade for the piece at the trade deadline. Last year, it was not Timo Meyer. It was a Nino Niederreiter who no one thought was really even on the trading block. It was, the Paul Stassi's. Like, he makes the other trades. And this Shawn Monahan has been a talking point. He was up there with the Elias Lindholm conversation pieces for guys that contending teams would want to bring in. And I don't know if they've ever done that before. I don't know. Maybe if you want to give us a little bit more of an objective lens on kind of what your thoughts are on just kind of the overarching part of it all.
Yeah, I think there's lots of factors to consider for the Jets, right? I think with the Elias Lindholm trade, there's two camps of people the way that they view it, right? There's the people who see Andrei Kuzmenko as a top six guy who can score 35 goals, 40 goals in a hot shooting season. And there's people who see him as just a pure cap dump. And that's like the other pieces are bigger because they're taking the cap dump of Kuzmenko. So there's that to consider on there. But I look at the amount of pieces that Vancouver gave up for Lindholm and the season that Lindholm is having. And I know he's had several good years before that, but Lindholm was a guy back when I worked at Sportlogic where when he first started like breaking out with the Flames, they were like, oh, do a report on Elias Lindholm, look at like all his underlying stats and like figure out what's driving this. And I was like, looking, looking, and like 3 days later, I was like, there's nothing.
It's Matt Kachuk.
There's nothing. Like he's just a guy in the perfect situation. And once that perfect situation disappeared in Calgary, he's been awful. And Monahan, maybe you could say that same thing about playing with Johnny Gaudreau in Calgary, but he's now fit into a different team in Montreal. I think he's also a leader. He's one of those guys who's just, I know it's overestimated in hockey discussions, but he is legitimately good in the room. I think he's especially good with young players. So I think putting him with Cole Perfetti, I wouldn't be surprised to see Perfetti start putting some pucks in the net that Shawn Monahan feeds to him. He really likes passing to young kids. Don't know why, but
I'll take it.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. I mean, the veteran guy who looks for the kids is always a good thing to have in the room, right? I think that there's like it was always an argument in Montreal. Mike Matheson is on the power play, and he never really passes to Slavkovsky, and no one can really figure out why. But Monahan likes to pass to Slavkovsky and sets him up for shots and good scoring chances very often. So it's always like, hey, how come this other veteran doesn't pass to the young kid? And I think having a guy who, brings that team building environment helps, especially when you're looking to build towards winning a Stanley Cup. And the Jets have injuries down the middle right now too. So we can't discount how much having a good NHL center down the middle will help them in their jockeying for position down the stretch, right? As they're waiting for the reinforcements to come. I think the salary is such a big deal because yeah, you trade a first round pick, but the Jets have a pretty decent stable of good prospects, especially at forward. that they can kind of afford to leverage the future a little bit here for the players who are here now without having to sacrifice too much so that those reinforcements over the next couple of years aren't coming into an empty team, right? Like they have a really good setup here going forward. So I think it makes sense that they can add Shawn Monahan and they still have enough space to add someone else, which they couldn't necessarily do with Henrique without taking like some sort of holding salary back from Anaheim, right? Which then you're probably paying more to get them to hold back that salary. I didn't realize Henrique's making almost 6 million against the cap this year. And Lindholm, again, they had to take salary back to make that work, right? So I do think the contract that Monahan's on is a big reason why the return is relatively high, but also, I mean, centers that move at the deadline who are more than fourth liners, it's usually a bigger package, right? It's like
Stonks to the
centers and
moon,
defensemen.
yeah. 100%. I want to point out this Chase McCallum tweet that I saw earlier today. It was so funny. Based on your earlier point, that was Monahan and Lindholm being dealt a day apart for big returns is funny to me because the Lindholm deal only makes sense if you essentially ignore this season and mostly look at prior seasons, and the Monahan deal only makes sense if you ignore prior seasons and only look at this one, which I think is very conducive to kind of the point that you were making about Lindholm before. But the Jets as a whole, I feel like you mentioned the whole good in the room piece. Any Jets fan, like I'm sure every team has their own kind of like lore with the good in the room and the vibes and all that. But
The
Jets
Jets have
fans,
some serious
Oh,
lore.
they do.
oh yeah, no, and I feel like the Jets have kind of overcorrected on it this year, but I am not going to talk bad about it because it's worked out extremely well for them. I've never seen the vibes being so good around this team, and I think this team is absolutely mortified of trading, for lack of better terms, an asshole. So the fact that both Flames and Habs fans, two of the most disgruntled fan bases I've ever met in my life, are like, take care of our sweet prince,
Yes.
is a very good sign to me.
And
Yeah.
with the whole like vibes thing, like the reason why they kept always trying to get vibes players at the deadline, the Matt Hendricks of the world, was because there was actively negative vibes in the room. Now we have good vibes in the room, and we're just adding to it. So at very least, like I can look at this and go, hey, you know, especially with that definitely, no matter what, I'm an analytical person. The reality is I've also played hockey. I know what vibes in the room is. You do need it. And also, like, again, it's really interesting to kind of take a step back from because like this morning I was, you know, going crazy on Twitter. And when the opportunity presents itself, you got to go a little wild.
Yeah.
But then I also take a step back and I remember, you know, the Blackhawks traded a first round pick for Antoine Vermette one year. So
Yep.
and they won the cup that year. Yep, that was in 2015.
Oh, God.
The Florida Panthers traded an unprotected first round pick for the following season for Ben Sherratt, and they nearly missed the playoffs. They were literally 1 point away, and it was the only reason they made the playoffs is because the Pittsburgh Penguins lost to the Chicago Blackhawks for tanking for Bernard.
Yes. That was just the greatest, like, crap storm day. I remember that so vividly because, and again, Jets fans, anything with Ben Sherratt, we're set. Like, we're set. We're ready to watch. And it was Ben Sherratt was about to handicap Paul Maurice. So it was really just, it was supposed to be our Christmas, but it didn't work.
It's crazy that it was the following year that they ended up going to the Stanley Cup final, barely making the playoffs.
Yeah.
Well, just win, baby. Just get in, or whatever the stupid term is there. But you mentioned before Shawn Monahan that he likes to pass to kids, and you mentioned the CP name. And that's something I think we got to dive into that a little bit. It's the whole concept of, okay, you know, with Dylan DeMello. Dylan DeMello is a player with a $3 million cap hit. But he also brings a $9 million player out of Josh Morrissey. So what kind of value is a player like that? And that's a kind of conversation piece that's always really important to have about players when they come in. Brady, I think it's pretty clear that this is a player they want to slot as their second line center. Vlad Nemestikov, thank you for your service, but they're kind of, you know, ready to plug him in there.
Yeah.
And you put the quotation marks because we never really know who's the second line when it comes to Adam Lowry and company versus Nikolai Ehlers and company also.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you think this is going to do? Well, first, maybe tell me what you think the line combinations are going to look like. This one might not be as creative as an answer, but then tell me, like, what do you think is going to be kind of the trickle down result of all this and how it's going to fit into the puzzle that is the Winnipeg Jets offense right now?
Yeah, I think the line setup is pretty clear. We all know that the Jets have been wanting to, or Rick Bowness has been wanting to put Connor Scheifele and Velarde together since the start of the year. It seems like whenever Rick Bowness has a specific first line he wants to put together, it always gets hampered by injuries. He's also only been our coach for 2 years, so maybe it's not an always thing. It's just it happened twice, which is more than you would expect, but it's weird that it happened twice. But I think the very obvious like line setup is going to be Kyle Connor, Mark Scheifele with Gabe Velarde, and then you'll have a second line in quotes, and which is I think what I really want to talk about is the usage here of Cole Perfetti, Shawn Monahan, and Nikolai Ehlers, as well as Nino Niederreiter, Adam Lowry, Mason Appleton, Morgan Barron, Vlad Mestikov, and Alex Iafallo. I think that's kind of the clear place that Monahan is going to slot in here. For me,
that fourth line looks disgusting to me. I'm so sorry. I hate it. I don't like it at all.
The Jets have had some good depth this year, and that's the one thing with Monahan is he does add to it. For me, really, the sticking point is are Perfetti, Monahan, and Ehlers going to be used like a second line, or are they going to be used like a scoring third line? Because all year we've been saying the Perfetti, Ehlers, whatever that non-Scheifele, Connor, Velarde line is, we've always been saying it's the second line, despite the fact that Adam Lowry's line, and which includes Mason Appleton, plays more than them. And so for me, I think Brian Johnson had a perfect tweet to sum up exactly how I feel about this, which is he said, "My copium is telling myself that Ehlers and Perfetti will get more minutes because of this trade, and maybe that alone is worth the first round pick." That's really it. And when it comes down to it, Rick Bowness has his guys, and it seems like centerman is really where he puts his trust in with the line. Like that is the most key important part of a forward line, which to be fair, it is. But having Shawn Monahan, also one of the key points is he is good at faceoffs. Whatever you think about faceoffs and the value of them, Rick Bowness thinks that it's important. So Shawn Monahan is a good faceoff player, which means that he is more likely to trust this line with Perfetti and Ehlers. And thus, I think that this hopefully will result in more minutes for both Nikolai Ehlers and Cole Perfetti, giving them maybe two scoring, lines to have. They might still end up beating up on the opponent's third line because Lowry gets tasked with taking the shutdown role on the big the opponent's big line.
Don't care, give it to him.
But really, it truly comes down to how Bowness views Monahan. I would assume that Chevy did his due diligence before trading for him and asked him what he thinks. But if this is a guy that Bones trusts, I see this as actually working out decently well for the Jets in the sense of you're going to get more Nikolai Ehlers and more Cole Perfetti, which I don't know why, but Rick Bowness, he just keeps coming out to the media and saying, I got to find more minutes for these guys. And it's like, dog, who's in charge of the minutes?
It's like when Joe Biden makes a tweet that's like, "We need gun control now." It's like, who are you talking to?
But if only you could do something about this.
Yeah, we're all trying to find the guy who did this.
We're all trying to find the guy who did this. No, but yeah, that's like the face-off piece is that's an ongoing discourse because obviously that's a huge point of contention. And my thing is this: like, listen, I will always take a player who is better at face-offs than worse at face-offs. Just like I will always take a player who's better at scoring goals than not scoring goals and all those kinds of things. But my issue is always when it came at the expense of other things. It's like, oh, I want to take away a guy who's better at where 98% of the game is played for someone who can jump on and win a faceoff. I didn't like that idea. I think that's a dumb idea, frankly. I think you need to focus on where most of the game is played, which is at 5-on-5 in all three zones. And if a player, they need to be net positive there. If they can come on and win you a faceoff, great. But if they're a black hole as soon as the play is happening, I don't want them on my team. I'd rather lose the faceoff and take the chance at getting the puck back than having a guaranteed, problem with you out there. However, I kind of walk back on that argument a little bit when it comes to faceoffs on special teams.
Yes.
Andrew, what do you think of that? And also, what do you think Shawn Monahan can do for the Jets in those circumstances? I know you mentioned, we talked about a bit about the power play. Does he kill penalties at all? I don't know if I'd want him to, especially if he's not the greatest defensively and not a fast player. Those are the two things that are important, I think, on penalty killing forwards at the top of the circle. What do you think of the face-off situation, especially at not at even strength?
I think honestly he adds a lot of value there because it's not like Manny Malhotra where you're throwing him out there for a face-off and like run to the bench with your canoe paddle for a stick that you don't use to do anything else but knock pucks out of the air. Monahan, I don't think he's a great penalty killer, but he can take a shift and not hurt you, and that allows him to be a guy who, like, if you desperately need a face-off win, if you have players out there, your key guys who are just bagged and you got like 12 seconds left in a penalty kill, you can throw them out there knowing that you're going to be able to get that zone clearance a good majority of the time. Power play, same thing. Even if you don't want him on your top unit, if you want to throw out an extra center out there to make sure that if you get waved out, you can bring in Monahan to win the puck, and then he doesn't have to run to the bench right away. He can be part of that power play unit, right? So I think he adds a lot of versatility that a lot of so-called like face-off only guys don't necessarily. I think what interests me so much about Monahan is he is a complementary player at this stage. Like, I don't expect him to be a play driver, but if you put him with other good players, he'll give you good results. Like, he's not a guy that's going to stand out and hurt you defensively, even if he's not carrying the bag defensively. He's in that weird middle, right? Where like he could have terrible defensive results and he could be around team average. He's not going to suddenly become the best defensive player in the world, but he goes out there. He'll try to shot block with his face if he needs to on the PK, but you don't want him out there all the time. You don't want him getting bagged. Although he has been pretty good shorthanded, honestly, in terms of creating chances. But yeah, I think he adds a lot of value. He's a smart player. I think that's what you're going to notice more than anything is especially with the puck. He's very smart, putting it into good places, good like area passes kind of thing. He does creative things that like keyed in hockey people like yourselves will notice and be like, oh, I kind of like that guy.
Okay. Well, I like the sales pitch. I will say you are winning me over a lot more this morning.
I got one last sales pitch to make Alyssa a little bit upset.
Uh-oh.
He is wildly outproducing on a much worse team, Pierre-Luc Dubois.
Same
number of even strength points.
I am outproducing Pierre-Luc Dubois at this point on an NHL team.
I know it's not a high bar, but he's significantly
he got Todd McClellan fired today.
To that I'll say I saw a tweet today that was like the Jets just traded for a guy who has less 5v5 points in the past 3 years than Justin Hall and Luke Shen.
Well, yeah, he barely played the last 3 years. I think people have to remember this guy went through a double hip replacement. Like his career, when the Canadians traded for him, everyone thought it was over. So I think that's another reason why I root for him is he's a guy who in his late 20s was dealt a really raw deal by his own body, right? And to battle through it and come back and be an effective NHLer. It's one of those stories that I feel like you almost need a story when you win the Stanley Cup of somebody who had to tooth and nail battle their way into even being there, to being a contributor. It seems like every Stanley Cup winner has one of those guys, so maybe that's part of the trade too.
Yeah, it will be interesting, and I do think that he will provide value on the power play, even if it is to the second power play. I think he will surprise a lot of us, but at the same time,
I hope so.
I'm just worried that he's going to end up being a player who has flashes of nice things that everyone can kind of go, ooh, that was nice. But then we look at the bigger picture and we're kind of like a Kyle Connor, you know, like I'm just a little worried. Yeah. I'm just a little worried. But also I think one of the key points that you brought up was his board play. Which I think is going to be huge, especially playing with a guy like Cole Perfetti and Nick Ehlers. Like those guys, Cole Perfetti is fantastic on the boards despite being a small guy. And obviously Nick Ehlers is just a spit rocket. Like he can just, you know, as soon as he gets the puck, he can, you know, out of the zone. I'm really excited to see what is going to happen. I will say this past, 30, however long we've been going here has changed my mind. If I was the Steven Crowder change my mind guy, I think you did.
Success.
I think you did somewhat. I still don't love the amount. You gotta spend money to make money, right? So, anyways.
Yeah, I mean, at least you can go into it knowing the Jets didn't spend it on like a Ben Sherratt, right? Or
yeah, that's true.
David Savard
or an Antoine Vermette.
or an Antoine Vermette. It's somebody that at least if he's a defensive black hole, he'll still pot a few goals, and he has a habit of scoring big goals, which is a weird thing to say with the Montreal Canadiens who win like 12 games a year. But it seems like when the team is building momentum and they really need to cash on it, Monahan is like always involved, which I think is one of those like hard to quantify things. In part of it's just because he's one of their better players, but yeah, he seems to always make a difference, which is good.
Yeah, and that's you know what, difference makers, that's what we need out here. So I think it's again the other kind of thing where the groaner finish off. Only time will tell. I guess there's lots to find out in the next 35 games. But like you said, Brady, I've been a little bit more convinced. I made like a TikTok today, made a couple tweets, didn't love it. But now I've been intrigued the whole time, but now I'm intrigued with a little bit more hope. So obviously the All-Star game break whatever is going on this weekend, and then the Jets are back in action still in a few days from now, and I'm sure Shawn Monahan will draw right into the lineup for the first game, so it'll be exciting to watch. I'll be sat, that's for sure. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, Andrew, Brady, this has been a ton of fun. Really glad that we're back doing this sort of stuff. I feel like it's been a while since I sat down and talked some hockey with some people that I really enjoy in this sort of format, so this has been a really good time. Jets fans, Habs fans, hopefully we all walk away from this in a couple months feeling really happy with how this trade played out for both of our teams. So yeah, we make sure you follow everyone on Twitter. Brady has done a fabulous job of putting our handles up here on the screen so you can see where we're at. And yeah, stay tuned because there's probably lots to come from all three of us in the world of hockey. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.